Hello, my dear friends. Operator.starsky here. I hope that you can hear me well. Welcome to the stream again. We've seen each other already in the morning. Tomorrow we will also see each other in the morning, traditionally, with a different news review. But tonight we have a Friday night. We have actually like a small public holiday here in this part of Germany for everyone, but for me, because there's no time to relax, we have to work. And tonight we will have some very exciting stream because we will be talking about this absolutely incredible phenomenon of the Russian prisoner culture, which is part of the Russian culture, or vice versa, because like generally it's the same shit. And tonight I am joined, my dear friends, with a true expert of this topic, because as far as I know, Kristaps actually is writing his PhD research on the Russian понятия, and we will be talking a lot about this tonight. Kristaps, it's a big pleasure to see you. Hello, my dear friend, and welcome to our stream.
Oh, hello there. Nice to see you guys as well. If I'm a bit awkward at the beginning, it's because I'm on stream with Starsky. It's amazing. But yeah, hi to everyone. You'll see me later in the interview as well. But I've been working on a lot of this stuff and trying to explain this to Westerners, and it's weird, shall we say? But понятие is something that, by the way, I use to, when someone from the United States, when they started talking about back when in Prigozhin's days, I had a control question. The standard question, which they, if they couldn't answer, I didn't take them seriously. It was very simple. What's the difference between a red prison and a black prison? Look, for you and me, it's obvious, right? You know this stuff. But if someone claims to be an expert of the region and understands all this Prigozhin's culture and cannot answer this one question, and then there was a bunch of people who were like, what does this even mean? Why are you asking this? What relation does this have to Wagner Group? And I'm like, now, if you don't know this, then I'm sorry. Now, you're not an expert, and people didn't believe me because I really hope to explain this to our Western audiences why you can use this as a question to like differentiate between a real expert who understands this whole situation with the prisoner soldiers and someone who is just who has no idea, because that is like the crux of the situation. And it's because also this prison culture, it's in a way it's just part of this homo sovieticus, the Soviet mentality, which if you didn't know, everywhere else outside of Russia, we've been trying to get rid of our heads because this Soviet man who always wants something to be given to him, and state will take care of you. And there's a bunch of things. For example, the very famous, as they call it, Slav squat, the Gopnik way of sitting, that also comes from this prison culture, because back in the day in the gulags and in prisons, you were not allowed to sit on cold earth. That was zapadlo, which I don't even know how to translate and won't even bother because yeah, it's one of those things like those. Yeah, this is a difficult one because I don't even know how to try. That's a taboo. Let's call it taboo. But
taboo, like a shame.
Yeah, I mean, this is. I will open this because I had a bunch of I wrote an article about this for Foreign Policy magazine, so I had to explain this already, and at least for the terms and everything. Oh, but I have to mention this. I'm doing this on YouTube now in video format too, and there's a Ukrainian channel who had done a lot of work about this, but in Russian it was called Всё тюрьме. But I think he was some sort of anthropologist. But when the war started, he also explained a lot of things to a Russian audience about everything. But he hasn't posted in 3 years. I can't get in touch with him. But he's, what he's done is I use his images because he's selected all the photos from, Kriminalная Chronika from the 90s and everything, and he's compiled them. I wanted to honestly ask for his permission. It's just that I can't reach out to him because I know he went out and joined Territorial Defense Force or something. So if somehow one of you people know him, or if he's in your unit, please let him know, because I feel otherwise, I'm sure he'll be fine for me, like using his video materials, because I combine it and I write my own texts on it. But I feel sort of awkward not mentioning this because he's gathered all this visual material and he spoke about this in Russian. and I feel bad, but he just hasn't posted anything in 3 years, and I can't get in touch with him. I just want to make it clear that I'm trying not to plagiarize anything. It's just that digging through and collecting, like he has all the images from the 90s. He somehow gathered even the ones about celebrating Christmas. It's like weird stuff.
Bro, I remember we were also like shallowly researching this topic together with Max. I was a press officer in my brigade, and Max was also like second press officer in the brigade. And one time we just tried to check out the most popular search requests in the RuNet. And among those requests, like the most like literally what people are searching for, there were requests, for example, like как правильно зайти на хату, как правильно заехать на зону, how to enter the prison properly. So you enter as someone, as
That's my next video. My next video is about this because I started out by explaining all of the suits. It's weird to use these terms in English. Masti, it's card suits basically. But I explained that in general, and the next video is going to be about this, and especially about all those very dumb questions that they make you do. All the extreme stupidity, because again, all this culture is made to basically to keep order in a way, and to keep basically to make sure that there's like strict hierarchy. And you have to understand that in this prison system, well, there are all crazy prisoners. Obviously, you have to have some order there so that there would be no bespredel, which is also another term which is look. If you translate these words to English, they kind of lose some of their meaning in a way. I mean, like some words are okay, like bratvai, blatnoi, that's okay, but calling petuch a rooster, nah, man, rooster doesn't explain what petuch is. By the way, if you noticed on my big logo that I sent you on the prisoner, there's a little rooster tattoo on him too. But that's a thing. But just the whole idea that it somewhat resembles the whole society in general. The whole czarist situation. You have the upper class, and what I found interesting is that there's another very very cool thing there, that if you are a true crime boss or criminal, right, if you want to live with this, you can't do even the most basic works in the prison. Like you can't be like a librarian for the prison or something. You can't cooperate with the authorities. So for what we know already is that Igor Girkin, who works in the sewing factory, he can't be a proper muzhik. He's a kazhel. I mean, obviously, at best. Yeah. And also, he's like definitely sitting in a red prison because he's like worked for the Soviets too. I mean, this. Interestingly enough, I also like the fact that in modern day, all these vatniks, they play with the romance of this idea, right? But they throw around offenses very easily. They like to call people petuchs, even though for such insults, you literally should... those are the type of insults that you go on and you have to start a physical fight and violently defend yourself. It's a violent culture with totally different scheme of values. Well, okay, we'll get to this in order. You better ask me some questions about this because... that's a huge topic it's good that this is a stream because I'm sure there's going to be many questions about this, but I'm sure that we'll start from top. One thing though is the fact that a lot of people associate. I remember this because I watched like Western movies about this, and there was one where I think Dolph Lundgren or something was this mafia boss, and he goes to prison, and he's supposed to be this vor v zakonie, this blatnoi, this big boss guy, and they're examining his tattoos to check out stuff. And his tattoos are, first of all, his biggest tattoo is these 3 cupolas on his chest, which basically means in the prison language that he's already spent 3 terms in prison. Why do you need to check him? There is no need for checking him if he's been there for 3 terms. All this weirdness. It's just
right now I'm showing Russian prisoner tattoos on the screen. Like what they look like. You can see, for example, that they have those. Wait a minute. Let me show, for example, like the most typical one. Here. This is a very good example. Like in the Russian prisoner culture, first of all they have like those stars on the shoulders. They have church domes, right, tattooed on their bodies, where each dome represents your term in your conviction in the prison. And in the Russian culture, it's like extremely easy to understand if the person has been to prison, because here, for example, like this gentleman here has there on the left. Oh fuck. Oh my god, has like a bunch of those, like there is like a church. One thing I wanted to ask you literally, why is Russian prison culture, like why it's so deeply rooted or integrated into like general people's culture? Because when you go, for example, when you walk down the streets, you can see plenty of like patsanchik, of like Russian teenagers wearing those prisoner hats, wearing like sports suits. And they don't wear sports suits that cost a lot. They wear basically the cheapest shit, like Abibas, Aidas, and whatever they sell, like whatever like Vietnamese guys sell on the market. Because generally this is like the way they dress at Zona, at the Russian prison. They wear that stuff. However, they are not even like convicts themselves. It's just part of their prison culture. What makes Russian prison culture be so popular and so integrated into like general Russian mind?
Well, I want to start with a nice little pseudo-частушка from my childhood days. Please don't translate that one. Каждый третий пидорас носит фирму Abibas. Yeah, but basically the idea is very simple. It's from the Soviet era. I mean, think about this. 25% of the country had either someone in their family or someone who knew someone who had been like in there. In Latvia, it's not a question of, do you know someone who was sent to Siberia? It's like, okay, who of your family was sent to Siberia? And over there, it just spread out because, people communicated. People wanted to communicate with their people. This is what happens when you turn the whole country into a prison, basically, because it was a prison of nations, and so they sort of adopted this because, again, it was super. And then it was the romanticization of this, especially in the 90s. Oh man, we also had Улицы разбитых фонарей and all that stuff, and especially the brother Brat. We watched the first one on my Discord channel with people. I sometimes watch movies about like our area. We've also watched the first national peculiarities of the hunt, which is like a really great one. For my birthday, we watched the G Smatri, which was pretty depressing for people, but it's a good movie. But basically, all this cultural stuff, if everyone is, it's kind of like this, like it's kind of like Crocs with kids these days, Well, Crocs, when they just appeared, they were not considered cool or pretty, but they're cheap and comfortable. So if you give enough kids Crocs for school, then if anyone does this, then it just becomes cool. And also, again, same with regions who outside of Moscow, of course. Maxim Katz and other liberal elite will tell you that they have nothing in common with this, but come on, the movement, oh yeah, very actively going on in Buryatia, where look, everyone is the regions are so depressing that people are already thinking that, look, I'm gonna go to prison anyways, so why bother? I'll just live by these rules, and that's a thing that we really tried to eliminate in our culture, because this has to go, because those prisons were basically focused on punishing and keeping you in the system. Meanwhile, European prisons are more about rehabilitation and everything, and people might laugh, for example, at prisons in Norway, right? But well, they have the least repeat crime rate in the world. It's just how weirdly it works. So it's just this prison cultural thing. It's gotten everywhere, as we spoke last time. For example, the term halyava is something that the 20-year-old kids or 18-year-old kids use today, and like in Latvia and Estonia, everywhere, they don't even know. They might not even speak Russian. They just use this. And there's also this famous term tufta. All these slang terms and language terms. They sit in there. And also, for example, it also reinforces brutal homophobia, of course. Like, this is also the reason why Russian people are extremely mega homophobic, because to them it's literally toxic to even touch a person like this, because it's like instantly
I
bad.
have a question, bro. I have a question.
I'm trying to explain. I'm sorry.
I have a question that emerged instantly. All right, so Russians are extremely homophobic, like we all know that. Like LGBT is considered like extremist movement and stuff, and yada yada. And of course, in the prisoner culture, they consider it toxic to even touch somebody who was like suspected in having some kind of homosexual relations. At the same time, in the Russian prisoner culture, they have this widespread way of punishing, for example, people in the prison by literally anally punishing them, like using the whole horde of those convicts, and it's considered like cool.
I have to inform you, because again, it comes through Belarusian people, because I work with the resistance over there sometimes, and that involves somewhat less reputable elements. But apparently, you no longer can punish people with dick or with knife, because then everyone would be a petuch at this point. They just stopped this. It's no longer, since 2010 in Belarus at least. It's forbidden by the thieves in law in one of their things. Otherwise, especially otherwise. Like the people who are my age and your age, who are older, like who remember Soviet days, they're like more sane. They don't do this crazy stuff. But when it comes to youth colonies for like 16-year-olds, oh boy, it turned out at one point it was like 35% of everyone who came up to the adult prison system, they were instantly petuks, and you can't get away from that case. But also another fact that it also ties into the Soviet era, because I did an episode on Soviet criminal code, because I have that at my house, and I was shocked that. Not only homosexuality was illegal and punishable, as a crime there, but apparently even if you were raped, then you had to go and talk to the KGB agent, and he might decide that you have enjoyed it actually, and you could go to prison too. Imagine this: you get sexually assaulted, and then you have to explain to the nice man from the KGB that you actually did not like it. Like this, it goes to these fucking extremes.
It's basically sorry for interrupting. It's basically like, I don't know, like in Iran, for example, when, like, for example, a girl is getting like sexually abused, and then she goes to prison because she kind of provoked it. Like, the guy was like a proper guy, but she was wearing like inappropriate clothes, and that is why she provoked him to do that. Like, a bad person. How fucking crazy is that?
Also, the weirdest part is that quite definitely a bunch of these people who are the most hardcore anti-gay rights people. I mean, I don't believe that Mironov or Milov, those guys, the crazy screamers, they definitely have their own weird things which they are so horribly suppressing down. But this also leads to bad stuff, because this whole denial of this. Because they're obsessed. Like, look, they claim that Europe is this perverted, degraded space. We have like gay prides and everything. Yeah, but if you don't have to participate in them. In Riga, they happen in one park, and they have some events. And if you want to go there, then you go. But you can like live your life without it. But over there in Russia, but they make this the central part of their existence to fight these people who are like less than 1%. And at the same time, I watched yet another Alexander Nevzorov, by the way, who is not very well loved in Baltics, and I understand why. Because for my parents' generation, he's remembered for the early 90s. However, I respect the fact that he admitted openly that he had his own fascist period. So I learned from him, and he provides the greatest lines from the Moscow Patriarchate Church. And the fact that they still deny that AIDS exists, right, and that epidemic is spreading is also just bizarre. And that still comes from this weird fact. But what do you expect? I mean, they have to put people in some sort of caste system, because otherwise, they might get out of line. I mean, otherwise, the whole village is doing something, and you must like fit in, I suppose, and you must always blame someone else. Like, look, it's been us. Latvians, Estonians. We have been fascists forever. You joined You joined the club of honest Nazis because of various deeds against whatever Russia is doing. Slightly later, we had a previous experience with this fact. We're used to being called Nazis all the time. It doesn't bother us. But at one point, at one point when you start calling like even minorities Nazis and Jehovah's Witnesses are also Nazis. It's like the only list ever, like Russian extremist list is the only one where Mormons are on it, specifically their organization Jehovah's Witnesses. Some conservation thing about like preserving whales in the Pacific Ocean because they did something, and together with this mystical LGBTQ organization, it doesn't like. The idea is that they have to put things into these hierarchies because it's like a case system, because that is how the Third Rome, this medieval state, works. You're not supposed to think about even having some rights or sovereignty. You are in this case, then it is what it is. Of course, if you're in Moscow and St. Petersburg, that's a different story. But Moscow and Petersburg isn't Russia. It's something else. And Chechnya is even less Russia. Chechnya is Ramzan Kadyrov's weird magical land, where. I mean, Ramzan Dondon Kadyrov is great. I mean, what I like the most is that that people who I know that a lot of people just quote him directly in Western media because they read the translations, but the translations skip over all of Dondon stuff, and the Ramzan Kadyrov, I think, is just. Ramzan Kadyrov has made the whole thing a prison. I don't even know how like if Ramzan Kadyrov would go to prison, I think he would be the most oppressed Chechen man ever. I believe, because oh boy, all those things tie into this fact that another thing, like how this ties into Putin and Ramzan Kadyrov. I just want to start this logically. I'm opening my stuff here. You see, Putin was a KGB person, but KGB always had agents everywhere, even in organized crime. They collaborated with them. They hated the political ones and everything. And also, he was in this cooperative Ozera, like cooperative organized crime group in the 90s. But see, the thing is, the system works in the way that if you reach the top with your organized crime group, if you become the boss, you cannot just stop being the boss. It is impossible. Like, if you stop being the boss, then you everyone around him, all the oligarchs surrounding him who are criminals just like him, they would instantly stop respecting him completely. Of course, they can twist and turn this, but if once you have stepped onto this criminal path, you can't get off of this, because this would be extremely dishonorable. This is also why he has to prove this macho image, why he does the stupidest things. And for the listeners here, this is where also his language comes from, because when he spoke about "будем мочить террористов в сортире," that's directly how we're going to beat them in the bathrooms, because that's where Petuks live, right? The oppressed case. He uses these terms all the time just to show off this, because it's associated with some sort of manliness in Russia. But I mean, I don't really know what's so manly about a culture that's super obsessed with sexuality. Like, they're more like they call Europeans weird sexual freaks. But look, we don't talk about random sex with all the time. They seem to be focused on this. But this whole idea is that. I don't know, some sort of guilt complex. Like, people in Russia need to be guilty. The same thing about the prison system. You always have to worry that you're doing something wrong. And also, this whole system comes with like.
Sorry for interrupting. I remember like several years ago the Pornhub published their like referrals from different countries. They had like this statistics, what people in different countries are searching for, and like, of course, it's very like typical that Russians would search for like anal, on Pornhub. I wasn't surprised at all. Like, literally, I wasn't surprised at all.
The funniest part is that there is a map which overlaps this with like Chernobyl fallout. You know how it fell down with the rain, together with what people search. And if you look the clusters of where it fell down, then you'll notice that in those areas they look for Japanese hentai the most. That's in Sweden. Weird interaction. Yeah, there's a weird map like this. But of course they look up all this stuff. And then again, like we mystify this and obsess with this. And the same thing, by the way, is interestingly enough, another thing from this culture, because when I was gathering, during my historical episodes, I spoke with my dad and his colleagues, and some of them were, of course, a lot of them were in the Soviet military, and one of them served in the Far East, like very Far East, near China border, near China-Afghanistan border, basically. He was serving there. And I spoke about the fact that, but did you grow in, like, I knew that there were like drugs going on there and all this stuff. But drugs were such a massive taboo there that he even after all these years just refused to talk about his experiences, whether or not someone was moving them and everything. That's another another form of control in a way, which is also another weird thing, because drugs specifically, they're viewed as like such a massive taboo there. Also, like even like smoking weed, they cannot like associate this, because drinking was already a problem, and that's part of this whole Bolshevik agenda, because it gives you some weird thoughts. Also, another reason why this came in is another substitution for my favorite topic, whatever has happened to Moscow Orthodoxy and that Orthodox Church. Because if you look at historical imperial Russia, then it's obviously tied together there. And basically, what Bolsheviks did, because no other like very few countries have been like actively this atheistic with the bezbozhnik and everything, because they sought to replace their system of traditional like values in Orthodoxy with their Bolshevik values, and then those prison values came in, and they also worked quite fine. So now they're in the mishmash, and together we can see people praying to Stalin and all that mess. It's just so alien. And like Stalin,
absolutely. Like the other day, I was showing our dear family a video from Moscow. There was this like statue of Lenin installed, actually, and the Russian babushka was like, "Oh my God, Lenin! Thank you so much that they have it like here. Glory to the Lord." And the dude who records the video is like, "Why are you glorifying the Lord? This dude literally destroyed like all the churches in the former Russian Empire." She's like, whatever, you know. Like it's so freaking like, yeah, on one hand, of course, in 1943 Stalin restored this red patriarchate, so-called, because apparently, you know, Russians didn't really want to die. Not only Russians didn't really want to die for Soviet ambitions, so they needed some kind of motivation. So he kind of reestablished the Red Patriarchate with 100% priests being KGB agents. Like, it's a known fact. But at the same time, he eliminated so much more people, literally sending them to gulags, repressing them since 30s and all the way into mid-40s. It was crazy, and even after that, they were still referring to the church around the Soviet gulag. They were referring as basically opium for people. They were like, you know, like if you are baptized in the church, then you're basically like an outcast in the Soviet society. I wanted to ask you this. What is like top 5 surprising things that surprise the shit out of Westerners when you tell them about the Russian prisoner culture?
Okay, I'll get to that, but imagine this, because I come from a very weird family. Both of my grandmothers are Jewish, and they all had to hide those documents. One of my grandfathers he comes like from Latgal region, like more very countryside person, and my other grandpa, you know, he comes from a family of Baltic German nobility who didn't leave, and like my grandma's father was a Lutheran pastor during those times. So imagine a Jewish lady who's married in the family of a Lutheran pastor in Soviet era. She had to and she ended up like she had to get like maximum grade everywhere, because otherwise they wouldn't let her go to university at all. And she got like everything was a 5 except Russian language. She just refused to study, so she got a 3. She could speak that, but she just didn't want to do this. It was very real.
Bro, I'm very sorry, but I think you froze.
Oh, please excuse me. I will.
Yeah, sure. I will return very soon. All right. Okay. Yeah, we have you back. Cool.
It's weirdly enough, my laptop is doing this, because again, last time my PC wasn't brought there, but that'd be fine. It's just what people don't understand is that the pioneers, the Soviet version of scouts, right? They were literally sent on Sundays to stand outside the church to take notes of people who will be going to the church, and then sending them away, and you could get punished for this. It was just it wasn't just like a disapproval. It was active fight against this. But someone mentioned MAGA there in the chat, and I will I have a gift for you, because I have read Vladimir Kvachkov. I think you know who that is, and you know where this is going. Oh boy, he wrote the manifesto of the Russian world and is sort of this KGB colonel who's now hyper orthodox. I'll find it later. He wrote about all this mess, and recently he wrote about how the prisoners, which is why this ties together, how the prisoners can truly get out of their sins against the glorious Russian Empire, which is absolutely divine. I'm serious, because this is how they atone for their sins by going on meat assaults. It's also tied into this stuff because if you've noticed on the tattoos, they're also very much orthodox and everything. So this, well, pseudo-orthodox. I wouldn't call them orthodox. It's just because it's just this weirdness that it ties in together. And currently, like in the Russian prison culture, Russian mafia, they also are very much into this very weird, twisted belief of sort of Christianity. But this weird belief in Christianity has taken over all of Russia because Putin is running Russia like a big, basically like a mafia cartel, I suppose, someone from Mexico. And all this idea is that when I see people analyzing the situation there, they presume that Russia has like a leader like everyone else, and that Russia is like a normal country. But you have to understand that Putin not only does not intend for Russia to be a normal country, he thinks it's heretical to basically be all that all this criminal cultural stuff. So this is the extent of how it's tied into this. And they might, again, Russian liberal opposition might not admit this, but even they themselves openly use terms straight up from that culture. They all know these terms, and they all use them because they sometimes are the most accurate ones. And not knowing this stuff can truly cause a lot of trouble. I'll quote myself here because that was a good argument of mine, because I wrote here about the Institute for Study of War, which is just excellent. Quote myself from Foreign Policy magazine. In an April 10 report from the Institute for the Study of War, the понятия are entirely ignored. Instead, it mentions only Prigozhin insinuated that the Russian Ministry of Defense would treat convicts worse than Wagner treated them to further and advertise recruitment into Wagner, and used convicts in human wave attacks that cost thousands of them their lives. That misses the point entirely, because Prigozhin isn't talking about regular treatment. In there, he stated that if they join us, then we live by the понятия and everyone's fine. Petuks are not placed into fight next to mujiks. All this stuff, and they missed the whole point of organization. And they just ignored everything that was said in slang language, but that carries a deep meaning because, again, that is something that we all understand. Like, if you grew up in the 90s, you instantly know all these stupid terms. Absolutely, because everyone just does all this mess. It's something that it's really a remnant from the Soviet era, because it didn't exist before Soviet times. Even like in Tsarist prison days, it was a whole different culture. But then it sort of spread around. And again, also, truth to be told, for KGB, it was easier to control all of the prison if they had to control just this one central group, because, the real prisoners, the career criminals, they could beat up the political ones easily. They could keep them in control. And the same thing happens. You give someone an extra day when he meets his wife or relative or whatever, and then they just do the dirty work. It's the whole situation. It's not that the prison culture and then these weird terms of different castes and punishments and weird rules, which we can get into detail with. It's not that they're ingrained into the society there. They were ingrained in Soviet society. But in Russian society, basically the modern system that Putin has built, even if you look at his top surroundings, it's built around these laws. They form the basis of this. And this is why the corruption system exists as such, because everyone needs to be put together in this crime so that they can all be punished. Like, look at the very, very, very first day when the invasion started, right? What did Putin do? He pulled out all of his other people, all the big ones, and just made them sure that they are all now responsible for this stuff. Let me remind you that, by the way, waging an aggressive war is literally illegal in Russia. That's against the constitution. But, Russian constitution is already a funny little thing, which doesn't mean anything at all. So this is why they also can't admit this. He made everyone guilty, and which is why he also allows corruption in all the regions as much as they want, because he can put anyone into prison for anything. There is this saying, человек есть, стать найдется. There is a human will find this. Standard one was 58th article of the criminal code of the Soviet Union, which was about sabotage and anti-communist activity. just glorious one. But basically, you need to keep the country sort of crime-ridden in the sense that gives you control. And the same thing really happened with this is why we joined the EU, because a lot of situations with the corrupt politicians, even here, when we try to actively get rid of this, happened because when the attitude changed from, oh, we shouldn't do anything, we shouldn't write projects and apply for European funds and improve anything, because then the people from Brussels will come over and we'll have to do things properly. Whereas now the situation has changed to let's do things properly so that we can get investments from Europe. It's a shift in mentality, and you can't really, if they don't admit that the current system with all these pañachies and everything, that it is ingrained around this, and that's a real problem, then they won't have any actual reforms, and that's this whole that's the whole mentality that a lot of people are talking about. This is the thing. It's not that like Russian opposition, especially the smug one. I'm going to quote Maxim Katz here because he's the smuggest one that I know, right? He always talks that all this is a myth about Russian mentality, because he always quotes some slave mentality, but it's not a slave mentality; it's a prisoner mentality. There's a huge difference, because again, if you look at how serfdom worked, крепостное право, right? It wasn't direct ownership. You owned the village, basically. You were like sent by the locals. This whole idea that you live in some sort of tiny little area where everyone looks over each other. Like, the country is super huge. You can't organize everything centrally, and you can only try this by turning into a huge prison. And in the Soviet era, also, I mean, Latvians, Estonians, Ukrainians, everyone who wasn't from the Russian specific Soviet region, right? Everyone felt the same oppression, the same things about Russification, the fact that the very fact that you speak a different language is bad and wrong. Also, they tried to adopt our national folk songs by putting them about like kolkhozs and everything. Just the active. It's really hard to explain to this, but this is also, by the way, how I shock Americans. You ask me what shocks them. Americans get shocked the most when I tell them that, yeah, actually, I associate more with, say, Native Americans like Iroquois than the white Americans, especially with our history, because this is our land, and then we got some random people colonizing us, and our language is systematically oppressed. And then But in the United States, I've noticed that it's more about race, less about culture, so it's hard for them to accept this. But that's exactly what happened. I mean, this is when the bigger empire comes in and treats you like a colony. Absolutely, that's a shocking thing. Other shocking thing is, of course, that everyone's used to this sort of racial prison crime system. They're used to these very posh, like the bandits at the top. These guys are the cool, smug ones, but everyone else is like race-based. In Soviet Union, doesn't matter what your race is in prison. If you're a petuch, you're a petuch. It doesn't matter at all. It's absolutely like overwhelmingly true. And the fact that this prison culture thing, again, it got normalized and glorified a lot in the West. And when I get to the facts that when we get to petuchs, the under like whole prison system is based on the fact that you might become a petuch, because you will never rise up above this, and it is just. The levels of inhumanity are such that this stream will get demonetized instantly. But I have to speak about this. The fact is that you can't touch them. They have to eat with special spoons. There's insane amounts of rules for them. You can only beat them using your legs or a stick, for example. It's a bunch of stupid rules. Like, it's super easy to become in that case, and then you're there for life. There is no way up, and their life is living hell, basically. They have to always announce who they are when they enter this stuff, and the punishment for being one is so brutal and heavy that literally dying is considered like a serious option. This sort of, if you live in Russia, you have to make the utmost punishment for disobeying and doing something so horribly awful and bad that so that they would actually, so that people wouldn't protest or something. It's the same way with every other attitude from the Vatniks, why they believe all these conspiracy theories. Because I was asked by my patrons to explain where they get information about Europe and America, and that's a whole rabbit hole. But they have to invent all new weird lies. I really love the one where apparently we in Europe extract from baby's blood some drug that we send to Ukraine, and this is how you have super soldiers. This is just all that. They have to invent all these conspiracy theories because they see how shit life is in Russia. But due to the fact that to them it's sort of tied into all these beliefs about massive greatness. and so they have to invent all this nonsense. It's totally weird denial of the truth. Also, I just opened the chat. I like how all Latvians I know love to rant. Let me tell you, the Latvians you've seen probably, we rant because we're the very few extroverted people. Actually, most of Latvians are kind of like Finnish people. We're very quieter. This was the thing I noticed in Ukraine. You guys are way more open and friendlier already.
I don't know, I guess. But we also have Rick the Ukrainian, my bro here in the chat. He asks, where did you get this awesome SBU hat? I think you can share if you like.
Of course, well, this was a silly story. I did not even know. I knew that I wasn't explained much about this hat. I was sitting near Bessarabskaya market, that place, There was a cafe there, and I was talking with some representatives from your Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I had just finished my trip where I did reporting on Mykolaiv just before Kherson was liberated. You can show them the weird photo, because that's also a cool story later on. I had done a lot of good work. We donated 5 cars to the Ukrainian armed forces. And as I was leaving, I was just given this hat as a gift, and they told me that you can't buy it anywhere. Thank you for your work. This is something special and cool. Ukrainians will understand. So I was told to wear it on special occasions, and so I am. And then just this morning, I was explained this by Starsky. But show them the photo, because that's something weird. The weird photo was that we managed to not be stopped in checkpoints where we should be stopped, and we took a beautiful photo of Zaporizhzhia power plant. Really like a one which shows how everything was flooded and how the cooling systems were going down. And as we're setting this one up and preparing to film, a camouflage trench opens up, and the Ukrainian soldier pops up his head and says, "Что вы тут делаете?" Because we were not supposed to be there. That was off limits to all civilians. We were just out. It was fixed very quickly, but I was really that time I was really scared, because I was told, "Oh man, you better get out of here, because they might actually shell you." And we heard a lot of this stuff, because because apparently I understand no one expected a random journalist just coming over, because that's not I went to that location because I know a bit of Ukraine. After all, I have relatives there, and they just called me. It's not on the official path, right? So I just decided to go there.
We have the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant on the photo right now on the screen, so you can basically see what it looks like.
I can show you that picture now. I'm across of it, other shore, and we were told to get lost because due to miscommunication, hopefully we caused some problems. I wasn't allowed to show this photo for a long while, because that's literally on top of a concealed position there, which made everyone freak out. But otherwise, that was my blunder personally, but it was scary. And all this destruction, everything. The worst part is that, again, about all this prison stuff, that is also a thing which I know, because I've spoken to the Latvia has an honorary consul in Zaporizhzhia as well. I spoke with him, and he also is in touch with people, because no surprise to anyone, NATO also likes to know what the Russian prisoners of war are saying. It's a thing. It's not a military secret. And the weirdest part is that, as far as I know, Ukrainians who have to deal with these people, they have to make sure that this case system isn't happening where they exist currently, because they, of course, think that they are in prison, but prisoner of war and actual prison are 2 different things. So I have heard 2 people complaining that they have captured these prisoners, and that they have to explain to them that they are not in a prison. Please stop, please stop making those people go sleep by the toilets. Look, you just sit there, just be orderly. This is breaking our rules now. That sort of thing, and it's just bizarre, but because it's not to the point where, the point of being this violent person and showing violence is also all over the place. Also, for example, if you've noticed, I checked this fact that Russia has a huge divorce rate. We all know about the violence against women in Russia. It's insane. They have this saying that violence against women is perfectly normalized. Also, if you've noticed in all the movies, that cheating is also somehow normal there. You're supposed to forgive this fact. This also comes from there, because over there, if you have shown any type of kindness in a sexual or loving way to your even your beloved wife, you also become a petuch automatically, because even because this they share with Andrew Tate, loving women is gay now apparently. Don't ask, just don't ask. It's just what it is. It doesn't make any sense.
I talked to one of the guys. So sorry for interrupting. I talked
Yeah,
to one
no.
of the guys that like we were discussing different things, and he said he was actually political. He was political prisoner in 2001. He was jailed for literally participating in the protest actions back when we had Kuchma, like all that shit. All the pro-Russian folks in the government, and he was a political one, but he said like I had to be really, really cautious in the prison because we, like in early 2000s, we also had a lot of that Soviet influence basically in the prisons. And he said, like, if I told the inmates that I kissed my wife somewhere, like, lower than her stomach, they would tear me apart. So, I don't really know how to comment this, but it's kind of weird.
I can comment on this one because I was born in 1989. I am literally the as we call it Atmodesbarn, or the rebirth children. Just before independence and everything. And after that, my generation, I'm 36 now. Basically, what happened with my parents is that they all hoped that we will build democracy and capitalism and make things properly. However, at the same time, whenever we try to do something, they were like, no, this isn't how it used to be. Like, it's like, but you have to keep the very Soviet mentality way. You have to keep thinking in that way. One thing that I noticed that, again, don't get me wrong, I just noticed some things in Ukraine as I've driven around, which reminds me of Latvia just before we joined the EU. The very same thing. Like, one thing is going to disappear is little exchange bureaus everywhere. They're gone because now we have euro. Another thing is that you guys, because of all this stuff, one thing that's Soviet mentality is that you mistrust each other. One thing that is common in the West is that you don't. If someone comes over to you on the street and asks you for help, for example, people are trusting to each other. But 70 years of KGB surveillance does this to you. We used to be more extroverted. People are over Soviet mentality, and all this prison culture comes in the fact that people don't trust each other, and people always think that you're trying to scam them. For example, self-checkouts in the stores, right? It took a long while over here. They were watched over because people were thinking that someone's going to steal something. We are used, when someone approaches you on the street, traditionally you were supposed to think that they're going to scam you out of something. There is mistrust between people, and that's intentionally created because when people are united, they have something to unite around. Then of course they are less likely to be, then they might start to think on their own. Actually, they might decide that maybe they don't need Moscow telling them what's going on. It's this weird thing, another nice little form of oppression. Again, I'm very sorry. Just that my education is, I'm a historian, and I also managed to, due to how weird studies worked, I took so many courses in political philosophy that I have one in that too. So I look at this from this perspective of how different we think. And on this angle, also, I really want you to agree with me, because I was talking on the Telegraph podcast about Ukrainian war, and I was talking about with some British people who had spoken only with the Ukrainian soldiers through a translator. And the British person thought that he had gotten the exact same message that I had. However, I'm not blaming everyone, but this is another little thing. I know that people in their 50s, for example, that you're used to not telling about all your problems, or maybe, Westerners get this deference, literally. And if you're working as a governmental translator for this stuff, you also won't translate all the mutt that's coming out from there and all this stuff. This is how it also gets a bit sanitized, and it's hard to explain this thing that it drives, like, prison culture is such in prisons, but as everyone can go to prison at any moment, it spreads around, and then it's used as a tool of control. So yeah, this is what we mean when we say Soviet Union was a prison of nations. My parents share the same prison cell with them. Like, we went out all over the place, and there's a bunch of interesting stories, for example, about like weird escapes, and over there in the gulags, weirdly enough, you'll notice that everyone sort of tries to stick together. That was the cultural exchange. Our melting pot, unlike in the United States where immigrants arrived, our melting pot in the Soviet Union was the great gulag system.
Yeah. You mentioned this difference in cultures, yeah.
And please interrupt me because I'm excited to be here and I have so much to say. I can finally do this. So please interrupt me with any questions. And if I start ranting, please stop me because I'm just happy to be able to talk about this.
My privilege to have you here, and I think that all of our dear family there in the chat also shares this. One thing about. One thing about Western culture, for example, when you go, and especially in the United States, when you go, like, how are you? The answer is usually, I'm fine, thank you, or like, I'm okay, you know, like that's the only appropriate thing, right? In Ukraine, it's generally like, how are you? Oh, well, you know, I've been to hospital yesterday. They told me that I have like this and that. And then my daughter-in-law got divorced and stuff. And they like start talking, and especially if you're like talking to more aged people, they start like literally telling you their whole life. However, in, for example, American culture, like nobody's even like seriously interested to know like if everything's okay. They just like ask you because it's part of the etiquette, which I find very interesting. But what I wanted to
they speak in lines in store. They actually talk about what they've purchased in lines in the store. Who talks to other people in the store? Like.
But we kind of do, yeah. Ukrainian babusia, which is absolutely different from Russian babushka. Ukrainian babusia, for example, in the morning, because you can see them a lot in like trams, in buses, in subway trains. Because when you're a pensioner. Generally, what you do early in the morning, you go and travel, for example, in a bus, and there you meet babusias like you, and then you basically share information, receive information, and this is how the communication flows around Ukraine, like around Ukrainian transportation services and stuff like that, and basically people learn new information and new gossips.
Oh man, I know. This is especially in bigger cities, like in Kiev. It's less so. In Kiev, it's like more like local district stuff. But in smaller towns, if you want to know someone, you don't Google it. You go to local babusha. It's a similar situation there because they're sitting there and then they know stuff. And they also, if you walk past them and you're, at least when I was a teenager, you know, I listened to rock and metal music and dressed up in like these black clothes and everything. Yeah. By the way, I started. If highly recommended, we have my new favorite band is Varand Gnord, who play in Latgalian dialect. They're really cool dudes from Daugavpils. Raised funds for Ukraine too. We're proper metalheads here. And if you walked past them, they would look at you judgingly. At the same time, they will always ask you to take them over the street. They always know everything better. 100%. The babusha is a special situation there. It's just you have to accept this. Then again, I have to give credit to Ukrainian women. They like to prettify themselves more than Latvian women. I haven't seen Ukrainian women always try to present themselves from the prettiest aspect. They're extremely beautiful. They have to really show off. Then again, it's warmer there. They can wear more dresses. Over here, we have to like sit. We're sitting in our swamp. We don't have planes and everything, but all this sort of fits in. And I heard in the comments about Romania. Yeah, I have a bunch of listeners from Romania, and if you're asking, my show literally started out trying to explain this stuff to Western audiences, and trust me, they don't believe a lot of things. I want to tell here what I said in an interview in one of the lectures I gave, because I was invited to Harvard when the podcasting started out to represent Baltics, and I was just surprised. And there I got a question from someone that I like explain everyday life, Soviet life, to Westerners in a way that they understand. However, they asked me, well, explain something that relates to us. How much did ordering pizza to your home cost in the Soviet Union? If you're from our region, you even understand that this question can't be answered. However, there is a joke that Americans did understand from all this stuff. I love Odessa. Odessa is my favorite Ukrainian city. I'm sorry, it's just natural stuff because of all the jokes and everything. And I try to translate those things because I think one thing you've noticed there, which also ties into this fact. Normally, in other cultures that I've noticed, a lot of jokes are born in prison. People invent anecdotes. Over in the Soviet Union, all the jokes came from Odessa. Well, 90% of jokes came from Odessa. Everyone retold them. It was all the time. It's sort of a weird situation there, and it's because
Odessa humor is something very unique in Ukraine, because Odessa was and still is like a mix of cultures. There's a lot of Ukrainian, Jewish, Moldovan, Greek, Romanian, all sorts of people, and they all live on the shore, and this is like the birthplace of Odessan humor. I don't know how to explain it. It's something very, very unique, yeah.
There is something about Odessa that I love, because when I first arrived in Ukraine during this invasion, I arrived through Romania, then through Moldova, and I took a bus. And over there, first thing, because after at the beginning of the war, there weren't any advertisements in Odessa. They just plastered anecdotes all over the place. And I'm this journalist from Latvia who's stopped on the border, checked everything. And the first thing I see after exiting my international bus in Odessa bus station, is a giant poster with the following anecdote, which I took a picture on. Rabinovich guest asked, "Is it true that Odessa is a multicultural city?" Rabinovich thinks for 5 minutes and answers, "Well, of course it's true. Spend an hour here and you'll see Jews of every ethnicity." Also, I really enjoyed, and I tried to explain the fact that I remember that they had the kosherные ежи at евреев Odessa for Putin's things. This is the whole aspect that I love. Also, this reminds me of Riga, because we also have these Art Nouveau buildings there. So I'm gonna do there. But about the whole prison thing. See, I mentioned Odessa because if you look at the earlier period, like for example before Stalin, like NEP period, which you can now see in one of the most beautiful books ever written by Ilfen Petrov in 2 parts. There is the 12 chairs and the golden calf. And in those books, you can exactly spot the very line where Soviet censorship entered. You can just point it at both books, basically. But over there, you can see how the prisoner, Ostap Bender, obviously comes out of a prison. Why? Because he has no socks. Also, he's Jew because he calls himself a Turkish citizen. That's how, a lot of, it's just because of history. But over there, he's seen as a more charming, roguish character. You can see that before Stalin, the prisoner thing, also because a lot of people went to prisons in Tsarist era, a lot of them from our region as well, because 1905 actions, we have a monument to that in Riga. It was fun times. But back then, going to prison, and there wasn't this case system. It's really started out made again in Stalin's era, when everyone was put into gulags, like not just criminals, like everyone went in there. And then I'm going to have to do a massive research, but it all started basically with this thing called Suchaya Vayna, or the Bitches' War, where the ruling classes of the organized crime sort of fought against the at that point it was either NKVD or KG, one of those things, same situation. And over there, it started in the Soviet era. Also, from that very system comes another thing, the brutal Dedovshchina or Godkovshchina, how they called it in the fleet, which I know a lot about because, again, I started out by gathering people's stories in Svet Army. If you notice that this brutality took over, this sort of weird animal, cruel laws, and then it was so efficient at keeping all these prisoners who were against the law formally. You couldn't cooperate with the government and everything, yet at the same time, everyone was working with these people for some goods or whatever. They twisted it around. The system worked so well, they spread it everywhere as much as they could. I mean, Dedovshchina, they started fighting against this also very late, actually. And this is the fun fact that if you come and look at this, Gorbachev had a lot of his own issues. We don't like Gorbachev that much in the Baltics. We have our reasons for that. But if you look at this, a lot of people, a lot of these Vatniks, they blame Gorbachev as the massive destroyer of the Soviet system, even though what he did was he tried to make Soviet Union not a prison anymore, basically. He tried to make it a normal country, and this is what happened to it when it stopped, when it tried to be a normal country. Yeah. And this is the big difference.
I would like to explain one thing to our dear viewers.
Sorry.
Dedovshchina is a phenomenon that, by the way, was born around the beginning of the 20th century. Sometimes like the historians think that it was born during the World War II when Russians introduced, basically Soviets introduced the Strafbаты. Strafbаты was basically like Wagner, all right? So Russians would make battalions out of convicts and just send them into those meat assaults. Convicts brought a lot of their prison culture into the army, and Dedovshchina is actually the result of that. So basically, it's a bunch of rules when, for example, when you are a draft soldier who served more than, for example, new soldiers, you are a higher caste and you can command them, you can rape them, you can do whatever, like they will be your slaves. And then after a while you get released from the army, and those who were your slaves turn into the higher caste and start to abuse younger soldiers. One thing that is very interesting, for example, to explain from the standpoint of a military, is that in Russia and generally in the Soviet culture, Dedovshchina was introduced actually in order to keep the soldiers under control. In normal armies, including Ukrainian army, we have sergeants, all right? Sergeants who actually play this role of people who manage the discipline in the army and keep the soldiers under control. In Russia, the Institute of Sergeants doesn't exist at all. In Russia, like, sergeants are basically the same privates, only with different patches. That is why they have this absolutely ugly part of the culture called Dedovshchina that comes basically from the prison. And one thing I tried to explain this morning, by the way, bro, do you remember this cringy moment when Putin decided to draw a cat in school at like a whiteboard?
Oh, yeah. You should put that picture up.
So I will put it up because I promised our dear family to show it tonight. So the story is Putin was invited to a school, and he wrote like 1st of September, shit like that, on the whiteboard, and then he decided to draw something funny, all right, and he decided to draw like a cat. Here, for example, you can see so he drew this stuff, all right, and he explained that this is actually a cat from behind, all right? And everybody were like, hee hee, haha, because generally speaking, like, that's, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but that stuff is not a cat. Like, it's a pussy, yeah, but it's not really a cat. So he drew like a female genitals for like little kids sitting there in the class, and he was like, hee hee, haha, like, he thought it was funny. Like, he genuinely thought that like those kids would look at the vagina on the whiteboard and laugh, because he apparently thought that kids even like knew how it, like, what it looks like, right? But it's just one of those cringy moments, from Putin being a fucking dictator and pervert, because when you try to explain Westerners about their prisoner culture, about Putin being a fucking pervert, like kissing boys and shit like that on the stomach, it's so much different from what they actually have in mind, because they were raised on like different probably Russian movies, Nikita Mikhalkov, different stories about Russia, different, propaganda portraying Russian army, those officer traditions, honor of the Russian officer and shit like that. But on the other hand, when you look at what they do in Ukraine, that is fucking insane. I told this morning to our viewers that there's a lot of different Russian comedians, especially people on the YouTube, that try to pretend they're gopniks to show how they're funny and ridiculous and stuff, but they are not showing the reality, because if you want to make funny comedy stand-ups about Russia, unfortunately, they will not be funny because they will be involving war crimes. They will be involving a lot of like mass murders. They will be involving Russians stealing toilets, shooting prisoners like in the basements and things like that. And this is why it's so important to have people like you on the streams to talk to our Western audience about that, because people have to know more about Russia, what it really is, I think. And by the way, it would be great if you restart your camera, because you kind of froze again. Yeah. He will be back in just a second.
My laptop is
All
doing
right,
silly
yeah.
things. But I want to add to you to this stuff. This also explains in everyday cultural stuff. In Western cultures, and this is also was a shock for me when I started working with the West. Over here in normal companies, your boss is just your boss, and you can go talk to him. And because of this case system, which has spread from prison to army and everyday life, if you mess up at work, your boss will yell at you, literally humiliate you, and there is nothing more wrong than admitting your mistake. This is considered like also Zapad law, as they say, right? So this also spreads around, and this is also in the sense that politicians also view themselves versus the ordinary Russians. And about the army, there's another little thing. There's collective responsibility about everything. If someone, like it goes throughout the chain, which is why everyone's incentivized to lie in their reports. I have two interesting stories about this, because my stepfather, he served in the Black Sea Fleet. And he remembered the story because in the Soviet army, to explain how army works, orders were absolute. If you did an order that was harmful actively, you were not punished for this, your officer was. And apparently one of the newbies was given a little tiny metal saw and told to a saw cut open the chain of one of the bigger ships. Well, one of the guys, but he got lucky because there was a random Dimbil going by who had also been abused by one of their officers, and he was carrying a welding torch, and he asked, "Wait, did you really get an order to cut this?" So he did. That was a cruiser. Nice going. That a cruiser's anchor chain drops down. That's a horrid story. But other option is how people could learn to abuse this is that happened in Latvia back in the 70s, because there were a lot of veterans of World War II, and a lot of them had trophies, and in a lot of nice cases it wasn't just Kalashnikovs who also were they were supposed to be confiscated. In one of those cases, a local kolkhoz, like a countryside thing, refused to fix a roof of one of these veterans. Just, they didn't have resources, it was all stolen. And then the veterans got so angry and nobody helped them that he decided, you know what, if I am old, I don't have nothing to lose. He didn't pull out his old German machine gun. He pulled out old German mortar and started shelling the roof of the kolkhoz. The problem is, if you overstep the system by so much, then this is the point that, the old man's gone, but so is everyone running the kolkhoz, everyone in the party department, heck, even the local KGB cell, they're all gone and straight to gulags. So instead, he was politely asked, please stop shelling everything, and it was put down as quietly as possible. Because of this collective responsibility, everyone knew that if you break system hard enough, then you sort of become immune to it, which is why also in the 90s oligarchs abused. And the 90s oligarchs, how they fit into the situation, let me explain it to you, something that happened here in Latvia where we also had problems. See, Soviet army leaves Latvia because they went back to Russia. We had a bunch of them here. But the generals' wives and officers' wives, they had a lot of money because they were richer than everyone else in the Soviet era. And everyone is getting the emotional breakdown of the 90s, where my mom was earning 20 euros per month. Basically, in modern day money, everyone's super poor, and they're given these vouchers, and nobody understands, what they're worth. And so that people have something to eat, a bunch of these people basically bought up for like 5-10% of the face value of these privatization vouchers. They just bought them up for nothing, for rubles, so that they can buy up lots of properties and stay here. That's another little thing. I'm pretty sure this happened in Ukraine too, and in Russia as well. And then the first step that happened also was, if you remember, MMM, that also happened, all this big mess. It's just that this criminality got involved into economy. So, which is why, for example, for my parents' generation, due to the fact that only people who had been smugglers or criminals in the Soviet era, cooperatives and transferring all German cars, they were the only ones who knew how to operate, and they made big money in the 90s, which is why we have a lot of issues. For example, we have way less mom and pop stores, like corner stores owned by families, than you would see in the Netherlands or something. Because business, if you tell someone that you're going to be a businessman, you want to become a businessman, Well, for a long while, you were looked at something shameful. That's nearly as a criminal because of how the 90s worked. There were no businessmen who weren't tied with this crime. That also set us back and is a part of this mentality. And still today in Russia, if you look at every their complainers, not like normal economists, but like Delyagin and other idiots, they always, every time they claim, even right now, it's the evil people who raise gasoline prices. The government must organize them. Like Ukraine, your drones are so successful that the whole like oblomki that they just keep falling and everything. It doesn't matter. It's just that they refuse to acknowledge this whole reality stuff. And for example, for Putin himself, I'm fully convinced that he doesn't know how economy works. He views it as beneath him because he just lives by his prison laws. So he expects like Elvira Nabiullina just to do miracles, and she's doing her best, but she's utterly hated by everyone who's a super patriot there. You'd be surprised that the woman who's actively saved Russia's economy and is doing her best by normal country standards, she's so hated because she's like this evil liberal person there, because she does things the way how people with actual economical degrees would. But that does not work with this weird system. This is how the Soviet mentality happens. It comes from prisons, and it is a slow driving poison, which is why at this point I truly believe that Russia cannot, like right now, their corruption is on overdrive to the point where Putin is just detached from reality, just because the system cannot be fixed due to the fact that everyone will have to go to prison. They would have to redo everything. And like you said, the non-commissioned officers, sergeants and everything. If you remember, in the early days of the war, they also thought they would win in 3 days. So they took everyone who had been a sergeant, put them, like all the trainers. They took squads from trainers, sent them off, and then now they have a lack of them. There is no training for the recruits and everything. Again, because if human life doesn't matter. And this, by the way, surprises me most, because the very idea that what I still don't understand, because I can't reach out to them, because of course now they avoid Western questions, except Tucker Carlson's, because we're from an evil country. But how do they not, to these vatniks, like the fanatical ones, the Russia that they're fighting for and the Russia that they have are two different things. They're unrelated things completely. And it seems that they complain every day about how this corruption happened, how they're selling drugs, how they don't have anything, like all this mess, and they always yell at the incompetent governors, like everything. They yell at the system. Yet at the same time, they honestly think that Matushka Россия, or whatever their divine interpretation, like for them these are two separate entities, to the point where I really started understanding that it must be something like remembering Byzantium there, because it is beyond logic to the point where this whole, I don't know, it's not even a fairy tale. It's just that they want to solve a problem in a weird country. That this is something that I don't understand, because even my brain is just weird, because you have had maybe more experience with this.
Bro, I think everything starts at the young age. For example, can you name 1 or 2 or 3 fairy tale characters, okay, in Latvia, like for example in the fairy tales, in the kids' fairy tales, and tell me what they do.
Okay, we have our favorite one is the third son of a farmer. He's the one that doesn't inherit anything, so he has to go about by his wits and do trickery to get rich. That's a favorite. That's a cool character. Then of course we have the traditional lots of weird animals. We like our bears and everything, and foxes and doing all sorts of things. They solve problems. Then we also, from a Latvian perspective, then we also have a weird. We have a weird situation where it's a lot about farmers' life, because we used to, we learned, we were all about farming. I think it's about also suffering. We have a lot of stuff about where people die at the end, very miserable. But basically, in fairy tales, we celebrate the fact that you have to be sneaky and smart, and then you basically stand for your land. Land is your value, because again, to dear American listeners, our administrative divisions in Latvia are literally the names of our old Baltic tribes. That is normal here in these parts. Basically, we really have this connection to our land. For example, I understand this is normal here when we've been living for thousands of years, which is very interesting. And this fact, it's about taking care of your land, driving out the oppressor, and being for us, it's a lot about being sneaky towards the Germans who came in through the Baltic Crusades. Although interestingly enough, technically my region where I live in now was a part of Polotsk at that point and was Orthodox, but not like the Crusaders actually cared that much because. But it's all about like that stuff. I don't know. We only have one fairy tale about some sort of strongman though. I know this because my wife is a Baltic philologist and I asked her about this stuff recently.
Yeah, because for example, in Ukraine we have again like our primary fairy tale characters, all right. Like we have Koty, like the very strong dude. Everybody would like to be. Like Koty, it was like a boy who was like carrying this big morning star and like defending his land. Then we have, for example, Ivasik Telesik, who was looking for his sister, and he was smart and tricky. And then there was this Baba Yaga who wanted to eat him, and he tricked her and put her in the fireplace and stuff. But why? Generally speaking, every nation, like wherever you look, they have some kind of character who either has like supernatural abilities that he uses or she uses to defend their land and stuff, fight dragons, fight invaders, or you have tricky people who use their mind to literally like achieve their goals. In Russia, you have Ivan Durak and you have Yemelia, который сидит на печи.
Okay, even who sits on the thing. By the way, interesting little difference. Over here, we don't have Baba Yaga because our witches are good because they were fighting against the Crusaders.
That's
we have snake ladies.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that's a weird thing. But Ivan who sits there.
No.
Then there's
there is Ivan Durak and there is Yemelia на печи.
Oh yeah.
They're different characters. So Ivan.
I know.
Yeah, Ivan the imbecile is the dude who literally. He's imbecile in the Russian culture because he's good, because he cannot lie, generally speaking, and that is why everyone is tricks him, makes fun of him and stuff like that. So when you read a story about Ivan Durak, of course you don't want to be called Durak, you don't want to be called an imbecile, right? You don't want to be like this character. Then you have Yemelia на печи. Yemelia, the dude who sits like on top of the fireplace because he's so lazy, and generally speaking he spends like most of his time there. And those are like their fairy tale characters. They have three more. They have Ilya Muromets, Alyosha Popovich, and Nikitich, but there is a tiny nuance here. They all come from Ukraine. So that is something that that starts in the early childhood, I think.
Mr. Starsky, don't mention nuances, otherwise I'll tell the joke, and that's not going to be nice. I know you know the joke. I know the joke. Let's not, that is too much even for this channel. I will tell you the joke in person if you ask me sometime. But that is probably the rudest joke that I actually know that's coming from that area. It's funny though, but let's not talk about. But there are nuances. Is something that we also still use to this day. But yeah, but all these characters here. Oh wait, give me a second again. I need to ask this to my wife. She's doing a master's in Baltic philology, and she has more to comment on this because it's really interesting. Because I was recently thinking about these various also kind of meanings of this. I was comparing Kalevala because I decided to read the Finnish Epo because I'm playing a Finnish video game called Noita now, and I checked that one out and I understood that everywhere. This sneaky trickster is everywhere present, like in Scandinavians. Yeah, but Scandinavians have their Loki, right? And Russia, all this comes from Varangians, sort of, so they should be there. Okay, I'm sorry. Give me a second. I'll get my wife for this. She's an expert on this matter. I apologize.
All right. In the meantime, I will try to recall some of our fairy tale creatures that we also have. Baba Yaga is like a different one. It's like, however, again, in Ukrainian mythology, there's a lot of creatures like Baba Yaga who actually are good for some reason. That like I don't know. We have Psy Golovci, we have the dog-headed people, and I think on a different channel, the Vibes Ukraine. You can also find one of my videos about them. The dog-headed people from Ukrainian folklore that is like thousands of years old. For some reason, they were very, very popular in Ukraine. Most probably it's because they represented different invaders who tried to invade Ukraine. They were wearing like furs and stuff like that. But it's actually an interesting phenomenon. And we have Kristaps back here.
Yeah, Evita is a bit shy.
Hi there.
Hello, hello. Nice to see you. Thank you so much for joining.
I will need those.
Oh my God. Thank you so much for joining our stream. Please introduce yourself and tell us what you think on topic.
I am Kristaps wife. My name is Evita, the philologist in the room, as he introduced me. And he asked me to tell about our stories, as I understood correctly, right?
Yeah, because we were like wondering, for example, why in Ukraine we have like this strong man Koty or like this Ivasik Telesik, the tricky guy. Why in Latvia people also have either like strong man or tricky man or like smart guys who solve their issues. While in Russia, for example, they have Ivan Durak and Yemelia, который сидит на печи, which is something we don't really understand. So that's why we wanted to learn a bit more about the Latvian or generally Baltic characters a bit more.
I would say it's kind of 50-50 here because we also have those durachoks, and it's usually the third son of some father who is the idiot, so-called the idiot in the family, but somehow he gets everything done by sheer luck, and it turns out that he's actually much smarter than people think, and he always gets the prettiest girl as the most important thing. But we also have strongmen as well, and they are the most famous one, the bear slayer, which is interesting. The epos bear slayer is it's not a natural one to say so. It was made by one writer, Andrejs Pumpurs, and because he saw all the eposis in other nations, and he thought that, okay, if we as Latvians want to be some serious nation, we also need to have something like that, and it's made artificially. So it's kind of debatable if it's actually real or not, or it's just his own fiction, but it's very based in some other stories. He just, let's say, synthesized all of them and made the best he could out of it. Yeah, why is it so that there are so many durachoks? And that's really hard to say. Maybe because there's that complex of smaller nation that we emphasize with them, because other people say we are dumb, we can do nothing, and it turns out that we are the smartest ones, and so on. At least that's what I feel. Why is it so popular, and so on. And the strongman, it's like the staple. You need some heroes, the local supermans, so to speak, just to look up to them. Kristaps has a comment. Yes, we have Kurbats and Bear Slayer.
Also, Bear Slayer is fictional.
It's fictional, yes.
I don't know anything about Belarusian stories. Tell me about those.
About Belarusian stories, I actually can't tell because I was not told those Belarusian stories. I was reading Latvian stories on my own, and I grew up in very Russian-centric place, so I know a lot of those Russian stories and so on. They are really similar, the Russian and the Latvian ones, I found it. But the Belarusian ones, I can't really comment on that. Sorry. So yeah, that's my insight.
Speaking of your local folklore, how, let's say, is it ancient or is it not really ancient? Because, for example, I checked and the fairy tale about the Ivan Durak in Russian folklore, it's actually really fresh. It's like 18th century or something like that, 18th, 19th century.
I would say our is something like that. The uh, end product, at least, but it comes from older myths, and it can't really be tracked down how old are they, those myths, because at least some things that were in those myths are still present in those fairy tales, even if they are completely different, but there are still some influences from them. But fairy tales, like complete fairy tales, yeah, they are not very ancient.
That's very interesting because, like, when you imagine the fairy tales, when you imagine like the generation of people being, raised on those fairy tales, generally you think that they're like thousands of years old. However, in reality, they might be like written, I don't know, like 100 years, like 200 years ago, which is like not a lot actually. Why do you think this happens? Why do you think we have so many fairy tales that were written like hundreds years ago, while the treasure, the wealth of our cultures is mostly being forgotten. Like people were telling the fairy tales to their kids for thousands of years, but we only have like the recent ones. Why is it so?
At least in Latvia's case, it's because the written language is really recent. And it was first written down by Germans in their best ability to interpret it with German, not words, but letters. And this is the time when it was starting, about 17th 18th century, as you said. It's about the time when it was being written down mostly, but only in 19th century, at the end of the 19th century, the folklore movement was getting more popular, and only then all these older tales were finally collected. So only those that were left in the memory, mostly of people, it was not written down mostly, and they were transformed, and older tales probably they were not applicable to those people. They were deemed too old-fashioned or unnecessary or something, and forgotten. So only the recent folklore is documented.
Do you know anything about Russian prison culture? Because this is like generally this is like the topic of today's video we were discussing with Kristaps.
You have gone off the rails with all the fairy tales.
Generally, yeah, because we talk about all sorts of stuff on our channel, and generally speaking, people don't mind. But do you have any relations in your research or anything like that? Maybe like your personal experience related to people who had experience of Russian prison culture.
I mostly know about Russian prison culture because I was exposed to it by Kristaps, by showing all the videos, by telling me all those things. So he's the main source for this information. But kind of recently, I understood that when I was a child, me and my friends, we were using a lot of language from prison culture. It was natural for us, even if we didn't really understand all those meanings. We just understood them vaguely, and some, I would say, rituals from that were also present. Like, I don't know, some street language and street um, gestures and so on. That was quite surprising to me because I was not exposed to that by my family or my closest circle. Only the kids just talked like that with each other. Why? I still have no idea. Maybe some movies we watched and just it got into our heads unconsciously, and we started to reproduce it because we thought it looked cool and so on. So that is some strange fact that I realized recently.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think about it, we had that, for example, in Ukraine a lot. We had that influence, I would say, of the Russian prison culture. Of course, we're talking about expansion in the culture, in the television, magazines, and things like that. All those Brigada, TV shows and things like that. But you never think about it as a teenager, as a kid. Like, where does this stuff come from generally? Because you see a lot of like young dudes wearing sports suits, wearing those funny hats, and acting in some strange way, and it's very natural to them. They talk with you using like this prisoner slang, the понятия and everything else. But at the same time, they've never even been convicted, like for real. They're like 13, 14. I don't know. They've never even been to prison, not even the juvenile prison. Like, what the hell is that? And then when you grow up and when you meet people like Kristaps, for example, then you just start to understand where it really comes from. That it's literally the product of media. It's literally the product of cultural expansion coming from Russia.
Yeah, that is actually very interesting if you think about it more deeply. I guess just kids try to look tough because maybe you remember that series Brigade. Uh, it was considered the epitome of coolness, at least in my circle. I didn't tell earlier, but I lived in a city that was uh, maybe 60% were Russian speakers in that city. So I grew up with a lot of Russian friends. I myself, my second language is Russian because my mom is Polish from Belarus. Maybe Belarusian, maybe Polish. I still don't know. They probably don't know who they are, but they like to call themselves Polish. So yeah, the Russian prison and 90s influence was really strong, but looking at this now, it's completely gone for the best, I guess.
Yeah, at least in our part of the world, because when you look at, for example, Buryatia, Yakutia, those parts of Russia, people just like they don't care much. Why do you think it's so much incorporated into Kristaps? We will we will ask you in a second, but it's interesting to learn your opinion. Why you think it's so much incorporated and rooted into the mainstream Russian culture?
That that is a question of questions. It needs a lot of thinking. What my view of all of this, they don't really have anything better because, as I see, uh, that's their peak. The 90s, at least for the bandits and not for the common people, of course. 90s were terrible, as we all know, but for all those bandits, so they still ride this hype train. Uh, because as we recently were talking with Kristaps, they still have no idea what a democracy is. They just know what the rule of the strongest one is, and they just praise the strongest one. Even when I was reading a book by Latvian author with surname Rītnieks, he was writing about Latvia in 50s and 60s, and he was telling a fable, so to speak, a tale when the Russian army guys stationed here, they were misbehaving and so on, and the only way how to calm them down was when one of their officers just took a chain, came in the room with them, and started hitting them brutally. And after that, they were very calm and subdued and so on. So I see still this praise of the strongest one physically, and it's just it looks so wild to a European, so primitive, but I guess that's all they have.
I
So
completely
yeah,
agree. I completely agree with you.
Kristaps wants to comment something as well. So probably I will say goodbye to you.
Thank you so
And,
much.
if-
Thank you so much for participating here. It was a pleasure to see you, and we would like
It
to see
was nice
Kristaps
meeting
again.
you as well. He wants to see you as well.
Yeah, this is as you can see, I have a multicultural family. But you reminded me that I can bring you the most epic content that is guaranteed to be a massive hit here, because I have a unique artifact at my hands here. When you talk about the fairy tales, you know, this is a book called Tales About the Great Congress, and it needs an introduction here. This was given for the primary school of Kuldiga for my grandpa when he was in 4th grade. In the year 1941, in the late 1941. This is in the year when the Soviets came in, but this is before Nazis attacked. So this is from the Congress where they were still allied with Nazis, and this was given to the 4th graders for good grades, with Stalin and everything. And I'll just read some lines from this, and then you tell me how this counts together with what's going on today. This is printed in 1939. They celebrate. Let's start with this fact that the introduction already says that it's meant for elder classes, but there was some lines which my father had quit. That like we have lines there. You'll see about when they talk about fairy tales, what they wrote in their propaganda machine, and how this compares to today, and that's I think their biggest fairy tale. Like lighthouses throw their light far, far in the stormy seas and help ships to reach the coveted coast. In such a way, the Bolshevik Party's congresses enlighten us to the times when human happiness will have no bounds. Now, when socialistic society has been built, these times, the times of communism, are not far away. And this one is about Poland. This is glorious about Poland. Because this is again written in the time they were allied. When the Red Army parts stepped over the Panish Poland's borders, liberating the brothers and blood relative nations in Western Ukraine and Western Belarus, the Red Army soldiers were greeted with cheers and happiness. From the morning until the evening, they were surrounded in happy, joyful mobs, workers, peasants, scientists, servants. With tears in their eyes, they were telling us, "We were waiting for you, oh great builders of socialism, for tens of years. Polish Schlachta oppressed us, took us the rights to work, study, and even talk in our mother tongue. These evil puns spread false rumors about the Soviet Union and our allies, the Nazi Germany. You could go to prison for listening the radio from the Soviet Union, but and you could be in prison for many years. But we were not afraid of any prison. We went to all the dangers just to find out something more about the victories of the socialistic state, about the most famous heroes, the Stakhanovics, the excellent scientists, and the Arctic explorers. And then the day of happiness finally arrived in the 17th of September, 1939. The Panish Poland, bourgeois Poland, stopped existing, and the Western Ukrainian and Western Belarus nations were united forever with the other nations of the Soviet Union, and together with us, they will fight for the victory of communism.
Fuck my life.
This is in 1939 when they were allied with Hitler, literally. Direct
By the
quotes. This is
By
like
the way.
historical artifact.
I think sometimes we have to like read this stuff to people, just so they could understand. But
I'm sorry about this, but this is something which I just like when someone starts telling me something about how Russia. I have this book from my grandpa. It's in Latvian, no less, and this is like printed 2 days after we lost our independence, no less. It's just a weird artifact. This is how I also fight. This is why Vatnik trolls, they sometimes assault Western supporters of Ukraine. They leave me alone because I don't argue with them about anything. I just give them quotes of other Vatniks and then they just go away. If someone tells you that, no, Soviet Union liberated some... Look, this is what they wrote about Poland and Western Ukraine back then. And this is the nonsense there. Also, they celebrate the fact that they liberated together with the Nazi Germany because here they're friends. I mean, This is how it operates. It's just the fact that I try to educate this stuff, and I recently spoke with my friend Toms, who is in communication with people on the front lines fighting there, and I fully understand why Ukrainian people really can't do this because I know how heavy and emotionally damaging it is for you. I mean, it's hard for me as well, but I'm trying to do that part, and I'm really thankful that you understand this fact, but it's easier, like you guys at least understand why am I doing what am I doing, but occasionally I have to explain to Westerners, no, you actually need to know the culture a bit because yeah, sometimes the biggest misunderstanding is when I see some person at gay pride pulling out the Soviet flag. Well, we had an episode about this, that a lot of Western leftists tend to think that Soviet Union was as progressive as they were, and then over here a lot of people think that they are just as bloodthirsty as them. I mean, I have had the person.
Can you reload, please? Because you stuck again.
Yeah, this truth about Soviet Union is important because of these misunderstandings. It just ruins everything. Because again, I have had people from the West showing me Brezhnev's era constitution as an evidence to why everything was good in the Soviet Union. I mean, these days you can like look at. You can look at like the Russian constitution. This technically also still exists. I mean, I just...
Technically, yeah. But you know what I think when you read all that shit, nothing changed. They literally talk the same shit about liberating Ukraine from Ukrainians, about like things that never happened in the real life. Being allied with like North Korea, with China, and things like that. Nothing changed in 100 years. Russia is still imperialistic, chauvinistic formation, basically recognized as a terrorist regime, allied with other terrorist regimes, and sowing disinformation and lies in the media, in the books, rewriting history. Nothing changed at all. They didn't evolve, bro. They evolved the tools they used to brainwash people. They invented like boat farms and stuff. But like mentally and psychologically, they are still in like 1939.
Absolutely, this is what they speak about this. I'd like to give an answer to two comments. I am in middle of moving because I'm now in my Riga apartment because I'm going to meet Latvian drone guys so that you guys can get more Baba Yagas. Also, I'm moving to 22 kilometers from the Russian border. I'm literally on the eastern border. Secondly, the book's name, if you want to know, is Рассказы о Великом съезде детям. Детям! It's for kids. Remember, this is for kids. It was given to my fourth grade grandpa. About the 18th Congress of the bunch of abbreviations, Publishing House of Children's Literature, 1939.
That is so insane. Oh my God.
It is just like I mean I agree with a lot of progressive Western ideas, but I don't like them using Soviet flags when they're fighting for them because that is just it means different things here. That's what I wanted to say. They want to solve this misunderstanding that's going on. which is why I think it's important to talk about this, because when you could go to prison for sexual deviation, and then you see something like this on a gay pride, it looks a bit silly and doesn't help the cause. And we're already being told that we're more conservative than Western people, so it's about this misunderstanding stuff, really. I feel like these days my role, because I work in English and I'm from here, I help a lot of Western journalists get in touch with your military, because at least some people who are responsible for your press, well, let's just say I understand why the priority of making it easy for getting accreditation is not there, but sometimes some of the requests are still a bit weird. I can understand why they are that way. It shouldn't be easy, but like sometimes Western media says something stupid, and then some bureaucrat who knows one part misunderstands things, and then it reaches and then Washington Post leaks nonsense, and then it's like mess for everyone. And I'm stuck in the middle now, because after 13 years of doing this, my fellow Latvians sometimes come over and ask me questions about like Western countries, and I'm like, I'm not an authority on this. It's just that we need to talk more, and I think that a lot of things that we perceive as normal, like I guess perfectly normal, they're actually not, and we don't think about this. For example, like the dryness in Donetsk. What people don't know is the fact that that used to be an aquifer. There is water below there. It's not a naturally dry area. The water crisis is so artificial, because if you look at where the water is, then it's just there. Like, for example, all of the Baltics, we don't have a spot where we don't have water, but then again, it's just 2 million of us. But you need to understand the things that are normal and aren't normal. For example, in Donetsk, it was not normal to not have a well. It sits on a deep aquifer. And if you don't know that, then it's already pretty bad. It's these little things which are everyday life, which you take as normal, I take as normal. But for example, it really doesn't help Western audiences. This is why I try to explain it with my way of explaining this war is just that you have to compare it emotionally and how it impacts Ukraine first and foremost, but all of the related countries in the region. It's basically as 9/11, like 11th September, but going on for years. It's a heavy emotional damage, because we all, due to the Soviet Union, have relatives all over the place, and they might have various thoughts about everything, but the fact is that the whole relative issue was the reason why Putin had to invade Ukraine, because Ukraine turned to Europe. And if 30% of Russians have relatives in Ukraine, and if Ukraine gets prosperous because of these Western values, then they might start to think about their own system. It's just this tied experience. So this is what I'm trying to do culturally wise, and which is why I'm doing my work with as much as I can with these things. And I really hope that I'm doing you guys justice, because sometimes I have to, sometimes I feel like I need to, of course, I have a bunch of things I can't put on my show because, again, of the people whom I've contacted with in Ukraine. I know about operational security, unlike a bunch of my colleagues. So there are sadly some things which are going to be out only after the war, when we'll finally meet in real life, and then we're going to do our shared stories. But that is the whole issue, and you have to understand that when you say Russia is a terrorist state, if you don't understand what that means, if you think it's just a saying, then you don't get it that much. I mean, I've seen a lot of horrors. That one of the things that I think that was the same time when but we actually met in real life for once, a little moment back then. And I remember that I was told by the guys who are demining the things how the mines are left in for people who come back, and if they see anyone in uniform, or if they see that you have multiple children, then they would put in these things. It is just so weird. And about these minor things, another thing which really shocks the Westerners, by the way, how we name things that arrived only after capitalism arrived here. Like in Latvia, the duct tape, the silvery duct tape, everyone calls it MacGyver tape, because we just understood how it was used because of MacGyver shows running at the time. Also, another thing, Soviet Union didn't have toilet paper up until 1986. Soviet Union never produced female hygiene products. Little tiny things which really change your perspective of things, because when people read about some sort of tragedy, they presume everything else is normal. Like, this is not systemic. So they just presume that, oh no, like they look at Moscow, because Moscow is front and center. Moscow and St. Petersburg, which truly are European cities. Well, European with, I don't even know what's going on there, but the whole idea is that they are not how Russia is. And also another fun fact about the Moscow, for example, is that for their population, which is about the size of New York City, they have a lot of Muslims there, but they only have 4 mosques for them. And every week you see the fact that they're protesting against building a mosque there. And unlike, for example, other colonizational stuff, they did the same thing with Chechnya. They conquered their land where all the Muslims live, and then the Muslims wanted to get out of that country twice. They fought 2 bloody wars to keep them in, and now they're angry that they're still in the same country. It's just, these are the whole things which I try to explain to the best of my ability because, well, I understood that I can do this better than recounting events on the front lines. This is why I picked thematic subjects, even when Vitnik posts something interesting like about Lyokin or something. I leave the day-by-day things to you guys, and I try to help. Here I'll advertise my charity thing because we're working with Autumn Harvest, and we're at 3,855 euros. We need 5,500 so that the Revanche Group would actually get their armored car. By the way, when I was googling them up to figure them out, I understood that some rap musician is in that group. If you could get me, I would really like to talk to him because I read his story, and that was really amazing. And also for what also people don't understand in the West, it also ties into this. Yeah, everyone in Baltics know that if it wasn't for Ukraine, if we hadn't made it in NATO and EU, it would be us here instantly because we're smaller and would be an easier target. For us, again, this is why when the Polish president also says that this is also our war for our security, he's not lying. He also understands all this fact. It's just that if you're around there, like in Moldova, the same thing. This is just because it happens in Ukraine first, and even then first around here. It's just it's a toss-up. Like whenever there's a problem, a small victorious war, and it gets solved. That's how it messes up. And I'm trying to solve this issue. Sorry for my rant, but I just had to explain this finally so that people understand because I get a lot of questions like this.
Kristaps, thank you so much. I know that you're following a lot of Russian Vatniks, a lot of Russian, let's say, opinion makers, right? Can you name like top 3 of your favorite ones, and why do you like to analyze them?
Okay. I will apply favorite. I will apply most entertaining to this because actually people who try to do something and entertainment are 2 different things. Well, first of all, there is definitely Yurievich. Whenever he posts something, because he's utterly insane. He's a medical doctor who basically organized the whole structure. Like, he's a medical doctor who instructs people how to apply first aid and does more to the Russian army than ever. He is also a fanatical. During the Stalin's death day, he wrote a letter to heaven in a prayer praying for Stalin's good health in heaven. He legitimately believes all sorts of conspiracy theories, and you can hear about him speaking how basically we eat babies and much more without anything. And he then applies magical reasoning and everything. He's just crazy. That's one thing. Other thing which I really enjoy is I watch what is this Mantian, that lady when she's on streams.
Bro, I know her personally. I know, unfortunately, since old times. I like her because she is the epitome of being a traitor to Ukraine and fighting for this Russian world, and now complaining that the Russian world has arrived. She can go over to Manic, and after all, I'm sorry, but I have a special little segment on my show called "You." From the old anecdote, you'll laugh, of course, but the water situation in Donetsk has somehow gotten worse. She represents all this stuff, and she's always with this younger guy on their streams, and she's just screaming about this stuff. She's good in the sense that I can see the despair. And then, of course, I really like Maxim Kalashnikov because he gathers all sorts of weirdos there. But he's interesting in the sense that he tries to be the intellectual of the whole community. He tries to talk about futurism. He calls himself futurologist and historian, and he genuinely believes that Russia is on the good side because they must be on the good side. And then somehow he gets then I have to note, Maxim Kalashnikov genuinely believes that you're the same people, so he has never called for genocide unlike many others. That's an important note. But then again, some fanatical Yurievich or other Girkin supporter with big auditory arrives in his studio
And in his interview with Yevich, for example, Maxim Kalashnikov says, well, but we just have to kill all the government. Ukrainians, they're just brainwashed. We can educate them. And then Yevich just looks at him and says, no, we must and starts talking full genocidal stuff. And then you can see his eyes something twitching. And when he understood that, one of my episodes, 299, is about some sort of movement on the front lines when he understood their economy is screwed. And it's sort of like you're watching a Kafkaesque deconstruction of everything that this true believer holds absolutely good and sacred, because he's gotten information about the West only from conspirology. But you're watching it to someone who he believes he's the villain of the story, but he truly believes he's the good guy. So for him, the world is crushing down, and you're seeing the existential crisis. But that again, and he's so much clashing with this, because he has to be this intellectual guy who portrays himself. He talks about future cities in Russia, reindustrialization, and yet at the same time, always his argument why Russia is not a fascist country, which is glorious. He criticized Gordon and others who claim Russia is a fascist country. We are not a fascist country because fascists were much more effective. Look at how they did Blitzkrieg. That was his main argument about why Russia is not a fascist country, because he has to pull off this, because he tries to do it. I like these guys because they truly unite this. Another thing is that he invites all sorts of people. Lev Vershilin is among his guests, whom I despise personally, because if you live in Spain and all you do is yell at these people, it's crazy. And of course, Igor Girkin, he was my favorite there. I will open a picture of what we got from his, because we made posters with him. Igor Girkin we have like a Stockholm syndrome for him. Sad Girkin gets there. Whenever Girkin posts something, we call him, because I really wonder, because his military analysis, I'll be honest with you, if Igor Girkin would be actually commanding the Russian troops, then war would be a much harder affair. It would be much better than what Putin's doing.
I can tell since 2014. I can tell you for sure.
He's actually competent when it comes to military affairs. However, his beliefs with his monarchism and whatever else is going on in his tiny little head, I just don't know how. I cannot understand about this. Oh yeah, here's a little picture which I'm going to message you, because do you remember my big logo? We made this picture back in 2022. This was censored in other places because people thought it was too extreme. My Latvian artist, Elīda Brasliņa, who's a art professor of the Academy of Arts, well, we made the ultimate thing how Russians view Europeans and everyone who they view as the ultimate evil. How evil Westerners are, the evil Westerner oppressing the Russian bear. It basically contains everything that Russians are offended about, but people mistook it the wrong way back then. I believe it deserves a new lease on life now, and you will definitely enjoy it. I'll just send you the link to that. That is really good. Because I can't find Igor Girkin, but this is the next big thing, because I send this as a postcard to Igor Girkin, because you see, other people, they might not understand that they're actually collecting letters and everything. But no, if I see a collection, like when the Vatniks start to collect some donations for their own, I'm the first one with a VPN to report their bank cards is stolen. I'm the one who actually, messages them letters to prison, where sometimes I give them, I put in €5 so that they get declared for like foreign agents. The little things. I try to be a little dirty asshole to evil people, and I don't feel that bad about it. Now, where can I find you? Here you go. Here is it's on WhatsApp. You can open the phone.
Mm-hmm.
This is the evil Mason. This is Mason conspiracy from back when. This is a combination of this was in addition to a compilation of Igor Solovyov on his show talking about all of us together.
Yeah, I would put it on a YouTube, but I think we can just lose this channel forever.
I know, but it is a nice little piece, so treat it as a gift, as a special one. I will put this somewhere when the better times come.
Yeah,
but
so basically, just to explain, it's like all the stereotypes Russians are saying about Europeans of being gay, satanist, fascist freaks. Gay, Nazi, satanist, fascist freaks, and
Freemason too.
Yeah, and Freemason and Jewish at the same time. And basically, this mythical creature is like killing the poor Russian bear.
it's a thing, and I now put this on the shirt next to Igor Girkin's face, and this goes on donations for the Russian army because you see, because technically speaking, I have, okay, due to my work, I had to have some lawyery stuff going on there, and my lawyer is a sneaky bastard. He also, by the way, organizes local Latvian anime con. Sergei Parvatkin, he's from the old school, old believer Russian things, and he helped me basically quickly steal his trademark and patent it in the EU. So I have the Club of Angry Patriots there. The problem is I really try to reach out to them and offend them more because, see, that is the thing that I think they'll understand better. See, when, for example, Azerbaijani president, who has their own issues, he knows how to hurt Putin because he does this in these petty, stupid ways. He knows how to do this, but deep concern doesn't help. Well, I'm here to poke them because Vatniks also deserve to understand something about reality. Otherwise, just a mess. Another thing which is scary is that I also believe that once your stuff is over, Belarus is going to have a civil conflict inside there, and we're going to have a lot of mess to deal with. This decade is going to be tough for all of us here on the eastern border, and we have to stick together. Or if we somehow decide to separate, like for example, Hungarian parliament wants us to, and do stupid things, well, they're not going to be winners. Hungarian, what is coming is a harsh decade for all of the region, and. Well, we had COVID in this, and I just remember how my grandmother, who survived through World War II, used to say, well, at least you didn't have plagues, and the most important thing is that there would be no war. She passed away in 2014, and I'm happy for this. And you guys, I really, really going to do my best to help you out, and hopefully we can get through this somehow. I know this was a bit of a mess and it was a mess and rambly thing, but I will, next time, I promise you, we will specify this, and I'll be in more details and more snarky jokes. It's just that my first time being on stream here, and I'm new to YouTube. I'm normally used to sitting next to a microphone and not used to this camera stuff, which is why it's I feel somewhat awkward because I'm not used to being on. I'm the other side of camera. Normally I do audio stuff. So thank you so much, because my wife has put on the nightcap. It's midnight here now. I guess I'll have to go now, but. I hope that you'll forgive me. It's been 2 hours now.
Almost 2 hours, yeah. I must say, okay. I feel absolutely privileged to have you on this channel. I really hope that our dear family there in the chat learned a lot of new and interesting information about the amazing Russian culture, about what they really are. And speaking of, this decade, of course, it will be really, really tough for everyone. But that's the reason why we have these channels, why we communicate, why we have this absolutely amazing community of people. Because I think in the times like this, good guys gotta stick together.
Yeah, I mean, this is all together, and this is how we have. Look, I was born in the same country as Zelensky. Okay, still 1989. I still have my green thing, and we didn't separate that much. And well, it could be much worse. At least we're trying. I really liked, for example, the song, I think 2010 Lithuanian entry for Eurovision Song Contest, which was Eastern European funk, which is very fitting. It said, "We survived the Reds and 2 world wars, so give us a chance. We'll manage on our own." But I am told I have about 15 minutes to answer any questions, so that you can just shout them out. And again, I'm very just happy. Here's the biggest issue here is when I'm speaking about this stuff, there is so much left unsaid sometimes that there's so much in me that I'm going to have to sit down and do this. I'm very sorry about this. This has been a therapy for my own brain as well, because living in that info space constantly, not easy. And I understand why it's, for you it's even harder. But tell the joke. I was said to tell the joke. Oh, that joke. No, that joke. Look, Mr. Yike. See, my channel is fully Patreon sponsored, and it's audio version. I promise you, in the next episode that I'm gonna make an audio only version, and then you'll hear the joke. It is very, very much not for modern audiences, but it is Odessa joke, which is the rudest one you'll hear. I will tell it there, because here, nah, man, someone's gonna take that clip out of context. It's gonna be horrible. The same with the picture thing.
Absolutely, one of my favorite jokes that I often see in the chat is like Bridget says, "Save a tree, eat a beaver." So we have
Oh, I can tell a joke there because I translated jokes and brought Soviet anecdotes, the Harvard ones back in 2018, the conference, and the joke that Americans liked the most that they could understand was this one, which also translates quite nicely. Well, Brezhnev, like it's the Cold War. Like Brezhnev and I don't know Nixon are walking next to Niagara Falls, comparing everything in your life about the Soviet Union. You know who has bigger anything, and then they decide to compare their bodyguards. And Nixon orders his bodyguard just jump off Niagara Falls. Nixon's bodyguard hesitates, sits down, looks at it, and says, "But Mr. President, I have like wife and family and kids and loved ones." Brezhnev looks at it, spits to the ground, and says, "You there, Ivan, jump off Niagara Falls." Bodyguard instantly just rushes straight up and starts to jump down. He's pulled back at the last moment, and he's asked by Nixon, "Why did you do this? You would just kill yourself. What's going on?" And then the Soviet bodyguard answers, "Well, Mr. President, I too have family, and friends, and loved ones."
We have absolutely beautiful commentary from Anton, who says, I thought that the Russian stereotypes were drinking lots of vodka, riding bears, squatting, wearing Adidas, and holding an AK-47. What is actually wrong about these stereotypes in your personal opinion? What is missing here?
Well, first of all, AK-47 is not a Russian invention. Let's start with the fact that it's Sturmgewehr 44, basically with some adaptations. Well, technically, there is some things. Later, other models are that, but the original one was just blatantly copycatted. Other thing is well, there's a saying, Russia has two problems, the Duraki Dorogi, but there are no roads there. That's the biggest issue. Drinking vodka too. I mean, drinking vodka is something that they do to the level that you can't understand. This is why all the 50-year-olds go into the army. Bears are they live there, but they have some issues because I got a message from the Academy of Sciences in 2018, just before previous Putin's election, where they were told to Siberian Academy of Sciences want to do a report on the ecology in Siberia, and they were told not to because that would ruin the results. Because they have cities where in the Russian industrial cities, there are cities where only 28% of babies are born healthy, where snow is purple, where the air pollution is 18 times the norm. They also sometimes pour gasoline into rivers, and then you can see Siberia there. The whole stereotypes that they're also tough. Well, yes, they are, but it's pushed to the utter limit. Like they are told that they're tough in the same sense that you have to push on this macho thing. They're tough, therefore they will take anything, and this is how they don't rebel. Same issue. It's just that there are good things about Russian culture as well. I mean, I'm not saying that but they have to be. A lot of the things you also believe are Russian, for example, in the Soviet era. Remember that most of the things are actually not Russian at all. Like Korolev was Ukrainian. A lot of things happened elsewhere. There were specializations. And the fact that also they marketed everything as purely Russian, and why you believe it's all Russian is why you actually believe in all this stuff. For example, one of the world chess champions was a Latvian, Michael Tal. He was branded as Russian as well. A lot of things that were happening there was because of the talents of everyone combined. Like I always say, the Soviet Union, like we lived under a shitty system, but I know that a lot of people really made their best thing ever. For example, like later when we got pirated copies of ZX Spectrum or the early computing systems that used cassette tapes, well, we had amateur radio, which only existed to listen to Radio Liberty and Radio Free Europe. But then that stopped, so we decided to use that equipment to pirate computer games and programs through radio during the late night. We always had to be this ingenious stereotype thing. Also, another thing is the fact that we like to pickle stuff, which is a thing. We had to learn how to pickle things because in winter we just didn't have enough food. Something. The stereotypes about Russia is. It's like the same thing. A lot of them come from either the very much derevnya, so a lot of them come from not Russia at all, and a lot of them come from the top 3% of Russia's elite who never wanted to be Russian anyways. Like I always say, in Russia, it is shameful for a politician to be driving around in a Russian car, and it so has been forever. Do you know, I know, by the way, I checked this one out, the exact date when Mercedes-Benz again began sending Mercedes cars to the Soviet Union for literally Tsarist era gold was the 9th of August 1945. Like the other day this whole ended. It's just a big mess, and it has to be separated out. Again, I'm not saying that like all Russian culture is bad. It's just that you have to understand what's what And you have to understand that, for example, they also forget that by the standards of the day, Pushkin was black too, by the way, just like Alexander Dumas, because he had this grandfather thing. And the very idea is that, just like with any other golden age, it's nothing in your history is ever as good as some mystical golden age that existed, because history books, they're written by people who also want to tone and plate over other things in Latvian history as well. And you have to understand that, for example, in Latvia, after First World War, it is impolite to talk about our own opium problems. Negative sides get pointed away, and you have to just open it up, deal with issues, and be honest with yourself. And being honest with yourself is something that current Russian system simply cannot do, which is why, well, it is in the situation that it is, sadly. I hope that answers your question, because they all deserve massive long answers, and I'm just trying to squeeze them in. This is why.
Thank you so much, brother. I think we will be wrapping up because it's quite late already, and I would like to thank you so much for joining us today. We've learned a lot, actually, and I think even more than that was left unspoken. So maybe next time in the future streams we'll be able to talk a bit about other things that we missed today. So if there is anything you would like to say to our dear audience there in the chat, please do.
I actually do, and that is more of an invitation to everyone once everything is better, because my brother runs a Vaz club. He runs Vaz summer. He drives around with an Oka car that hit the 100,000 kilometer mark today. That car is horrendous, but basically once this mess is over, we're going to have a massive car ride. And secondly, well, to the people who are on this side of the eastern border, I don't need to tell you anything. You know that I know that you know. We're fine. We're together. It's good. To the rest of you, yeah, I'm sorry for the rambling thing, but I've been doing this for 13 years. I have looked at Stalin's biography, Lenin's biography. I've looked at ekranoplans. I've looked at Soviet computing history. I've looked at so many things, and now I've been covering the war. It's been a lot of work. So right now, with an overview of all this, that's a bit just strange, to be honest, and it's an introduction, and I hope that you'll give me a listen, because if there are any questions, yeah, you can also just email me at theeasternborder@gmail.com. If you have any special recommendations, because of course I also was hacked, and some of the episodes are only on Apple Podcasts and everything, but just know that I'm trying my best, and well, if something makes no sense to you about what Russia is doing or how it looks like, for example, then just come and ask me. I'll help you out. Sometimes we watch painful stuff, because on my Discord we fully watched both Tucker Carlson episodes live. Interviews, I was crying about them. And if you want me, of course, Starsky and anyone else, to explain something to the West, or just ask me questions, and I'll do this, because I think, being from Latvia and doing this for 13 years with education, I'm really trying to fit this explanational stuff so that we can understand each other and, actually join together, because we all need to stick together, or we can't afford to just go away. These are harsh times. We have to stick together, and we also have to break our own stereotypes, both about us, about the West, and the West about us, because all of them are basically harmful and just lead to more misunderstandings and horrible things. And always remember that when you argue with someone, like I heard some people who called me stupid here in the comments, yeah, I can take this, but even when someone, in your family or something is arguing against you, if you start to yell at them, remember the human. It's much more beneficial for Ukraine if you remain polite and nice, and you are actually the better person, because, well, as my grandma would call it, you don't want to turn into a Moscow after all. You don't want to turn into that. And just the divisions, especially in the United States and Europe, in the EU, they only benefit Kremlin's people and all this mess, and they won't stop. If it doesn't stop in Ukraine, it'll go on somewhere else. So we have to endure through this, and if we are tired and sometimes rambly and sometimes you get annoyed by this, understand that, look, I'm tired just mentally. These guys are on the front lines fighting, and it's difficult for them. And also, what I mentioned on the show previously on one of the episodes, I know you guys, and I'm going to do something very good. I've heard a lot of people complain that Ukrainian people, when they make these announcements on camera for donations, in America it's a bit different. Americans sometimes complain about that. They should have marketed it better. Why didn't they try for us? They want money from us. Why didn't they try harder? The other issue is that guys on the front lines, they're not mostly the most talkative dudes who hate to be on camera. They're over there sending you the pictures because they have run out of every other option, and they probably asked for the tiniest thing. Over here, self-sufficiency and being this proud person who's very self-reliant because it's our land, that's very much important here as it is here. So Ukrainians sometimes don't understand why Americans sometimes criticize them, but Americans, they expect more marketing. They expect this flashy stuff, and some units do this, but I understand those who can't, because not everyone has someone who's talented at this. So it's not like Ukrainians are not trying. They're trying to defend their land, and what they're doing is truly the best that they can do, because soldiers in the front lines who have seen things and lived through things, for these guys to be actually sending you the videos there, it's really, really tough and difficult. And, well, this is one thing that I think practically no one explains to each other's side. So just be tolerant and remember, explain everything to each other, and I'll be here to help you out in case of whatever. I hope that
Thank you so much, brother. Dear friends, thank you so much for watching. Also, again, big thanks to Kristaps for joining us tonight. It's quite late already in our part of Europe, and I would not keep you occupied any longer. Thank you so much, our dear moderators and all the members of this channel. And also, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel of Kristaps. It's there in the description of this video and also there in the title. My dear friends, we'll be shutting down this stream. Thank you so much. I was very happy to see you guys. And as always, be safe and Slava Ukraini.
Geroyam Slava. Oh, and my show's ending is very meaningful, actually. People think it's a joke, but actually isn't. Happiness is mandatory. But this doesn't come from the fact that, others tell you to be happy. Always find something in your own heart to be happy about. That's the important part, and I'm going to be there for you guys. Good night, everyone, and stay safe. Bye-bye.
Good night. Stay safe.